I think it comes down to psychological safety in many ways
Mhm.
because people are like, like, I'm going to hedge. I learned from this really smart book that I read, which is called The Goal, about the theory of constraints. It fundamentally, re-architected how I think about work. These decisions are two-way doors for most part. So I'm like, you know, for the 1%, which I might end up disagreeing with, I'm like, I don't want to hold up 99% here. I'm happy to underwrite the risk and basically say, you know what, if it is successful, you can take the credit. If it fails, it's on me. I'm okay with that. What are our leaders trying to solve for? What is my manager trying to solve for? What is my CHRO trying to solve for? What is my CEO trying to solve for? Great leaders make you feel really good. They inspire you. They make you actually want to do things in an extraordinary way.
Welcome to the Beyond Brilliance podcast. I'm your host, Rahul Mohan, a senior consulting executive with over 2 decades in the consulting space at the intersection of business and technology. Thank you for joining us as we sit down with experts from HR, tech, data, and AI to provide insights and actionable strategies to innovate a future that blends human ingenuity with cutting edge technology. I'm going to pass it over to my co host, Jay, to introduce our guest for today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jay Gopinathan. With over 2 decades in tech space, I lead data initiatives at a global life sciences and biotech organization. So our guest for today is Abhay Gangadharan. Abhay is a seasoned people operations and organization design leader with over 25 years of experience across startups and Fortune 100 companies. Currently a director at Google, he leads transformative efforts in job architecture, organizational health, and future of work.
Absolutely inspiring to hear how you're thinking about the future, not just reacting to it, but actively shaping it, whether it's AI, hybrid models, or org redesign. It's clear that leadership is a thread that's tying it all together.
And your leadership style seems to be a big part of it, Abhay. And how you navigate this complexity is, I guess, through your leadership. So let's unpack that aspect of leadership a little bit here, right? You've got identified this intentional approach where you say, I want to solve big problems for the organization, I want to empower my team, and I want to underwrite the risk. What does it actually look in practice, Abhay?
What does it look in practice? Empowering your team. So I think this was interesting for me because um, I always used to think that everybody should be operating as fast as they can whenever they need to. What I realized is folks don't end up doing things faster, mostly because there is a lack of trust. I think it comes down to psychological safety in many ways
Mhm.
because people are like, like, I'm going to hedge. I'm going to hedge because, well, I can do this in like a day, but something else will come up, or I'm going to have to rework what I've done, or I'm going to have to go back and forth. So, how about we give it like a week? It's a hedging behavior, right? What I've realized over time is the more people do that, the more it kind of adds up across your entire organization. You don't want that
Mhm.
because what that pushes is the risk for, like, if the person's not able to do the report or whatever they have to do or their piece of the work, and they only tell you on day 7 of 7, it's not helpful for you because then now you have to clack somewhere else. As a project manager, that used to be like the bane of my existence. And then I learned from this really smart book that I read, which is called The Goal, about the theory of constraints. It fundamentally, re-architected how I think about work. Uh, you know, and for me, what that means is I want every person within my team to, first of all, feel like they can move as quickly as they possibly can. What that means is often giving them all of the autonomy and the authority to kind of move as quickly, share work in progress, support them as they make decisions. And something which I tell them often is make the decisions that you need to. You can check in with me. If these are well thought out decisions, I will almost, like, it's like 99% of the time, if somebody who's thought out something is going to be better than what I would kind of come back and tell them. It's like, if you thought it out, that's totally great. If I'm not available, talk to whoever is there in the team. You guys can make a decision. I will completely underwrite that decision. Then I might disagree with some of these things. Decisions are two-way doors for most part. So for the 1%, which I might end up disagreeing with, I'm like, I don't want to hold up 99% here. And so that has been my entire philosophy there, is to give them as much leeway as I can to kind of help move things forward. Does it mean that I don't have opinions? No, absolutely not. I do have opinions. I share them with them liberally. That means I engage with them closely about their work. That means that, I'm in the trenches with them thinking about problems, together. So it feels a lot more collaborative. I think that's been one of the things about, empowering my teams more than I would have expected. The other thing which I focus on is what I would say is underwriting risk. Risk depends on the eyes of the beholder. I keep thinking about that because, everybody thinks about risk very differently. Is this risk collateralized or not? If the risk is collateralized, then most more people will kind of come around it. And from my vantage point, I'm happy to collateralize my risk, I'm happy to underwrite the risk and basically say, you know what, if it is successful, you can take the credit. If it fails, it's on me. I'm okay with that. And if my teams are comfortable with that, then they feel a lot more empowered. They're moving as quickly. If my teams are moving as quickly as possible in the space, then everybody else sees the momentum that they're having around this, and they're able to kind of chime in and say, hey, you know what, this is it feels less risky because there is progress and momentum happening here. So I feel like we kind of have to think about this in two different dimensions.
Abhay, you mentioned that empowering your team by giving away authority. That's easier said than done. How do you ensure accountability while staying hands off?
This is such a great question. I don't think it's about hands off. To me, like the hands off part of it is the one which I don't agree with. I would say that everybody should, if your teams are feeling the pain, you should feel the pain. And I don't know how you do that by being completely hands off. I think the reality of it is you should be able to go to the depth at which you can be helpful to your teams. And so, some of that is accountability, but some of that is I've hold myself accountable to. My accountability to them is I need to help them. So it is in my vested interest to be as helpful to them as I possibly can be. Um, it also means that more often than not, because I am empowering them, they will be moving faster and more effectively than if I was to have set a top-down goal. Um, I don't always focus on the methods. I think there are outcomes that I want, and I want to make sure that everybody can kind of use their own appropriate methods to get to those outcomes. So an outcome here might be that I want a leader to adopt something, a metric, gain on something, um, etc. Everybody within my team will influence them slightly differently. The method, somebody might do a really beautiful quarterly business review and use that to influence. Another one might get a one-to-one meeting with them. Another one might influence somebody deep within their organization who they trust and kind of influence them to move in a particular direction. So I have kind of gotten to a place where I don't want to be hyper prescriptive on how they would want to get some of the things. I think as a leader, I can give them the where we should be going. Um, they will determine the what, which is reasonable, and the how they have to kind of figure out because the how will keep like we actually there is the how is not always as clear as we want it to be. The how for how I would solve it might look very different than how they would solve it. I ask my teams for help all the time. I ask my manager for help all the time, and they graciously help me every single time. It doesn't really matter what it is. I will ask them for help because that is what enables me to kind of make sure that my thinking is straight. And for that, I feel very lucky because that requires a level of feeling psychologically safe with everybody. I happen to work with a leader, my manager, who is just brilliant in terms of how he communicates. He is an exceptional communicator. And so if there is like high stakes conversation, I'm not going to feel terrible about like saying that, hey, can you please take this on? Because I know this audience will absorb it better from you. Like to me, it's not like that doesn't feel like I have kind of like lost face or anything. To me, it's like, oh my God, like, he's helping me kind of get to my goals as effectively. as possible. And the same thing goes for my teams.
I want to solve the biggest problems for my organization. How do you choose which problems are worth solving? And when there is obviously no shortage of problems to solve, how do you pick that biggest problem?
That's a really good question. How do you pick the biggest problem? I think one of the most interesting things which I do is I try to put myself in the shoes of people who are trying to solve problems, not from my vantage point, but from their vantage point. What is my manager trying to solve for? What is my CHRO trying to solve for? What is my CEO trying to solve for? What is the business unit leader trying to solve for? I think these are all different vantage points that you can kind of understand. A leader might be solving for, like, I have to solve for my organization becoming AI ready. For me to understand that is really important because if I understood that, what can I do within my realm which is aligned with their goals and objectives? Me understanding that gives me a picture which is very different. If their goal is to, drive innovation, then the question here is like, how do you kind of line up what you need to do against innovation, and how can you be enabler? Because it's much easier for you to be aligned with them than to kind of fight it. So that is like one way to kind of think about it. Now there is another one to kind of think about, which is you using data, you can have unique points of views. So, a unique point of view here could be that I understand a particular problem really well, and I can kind of forecast it out into the future. And here are some of the things that need to be different in terms of how I'm operating or how, the ecosystem around me needs to operate. The other one here is there are certain truths. The higher up you kind of level up within your organization, the certain truths which become inevitable for the company. And if you understand them deeply, then you can understand what are the headwinds associated with your work, what are the tailwinds associated with your work. If you're not thinking that and wearing that vantage point, then you're kind of missing a big chunk of the picture. So I feel like you have to use some of these combinations to kind of figure out what are the problems and then go after them. I love the fact that, what I've done, at least in the recent past, there's been logical adjacencies that we go after. One piece of work leads to, oh, this is a great piece of work, but I wish you had solved for this other thing because that would have been really helpful. I'm like, I wonder why I didn't solve for that. Let's go after that. Oh, then we can build. You can keep building on top of that until you get to a place where it is actually like, this is really interesting. You'll find that problems are generally like there are some problems you can call them sacred cows problems. This is like nobody's been successful at it. Every time people go, but from your own vantage point, do you agree that is the case? Do you think it should be different? Is good for the entire company? It might not happen this year, it might not happen next year. But if that is the direction of travel and if you can forecast it, then you can build your skills and support towards that. Otherwise, you're kind of always playing behind or playing defense. And so in my mind, playing offense here is just thinking about where problems are going and then kind of saying how can I kind of bring them into my world right now.
Yeah, I really like the way you put it, right? Kind of forecast the problem, if not address what implications it might have to your business. It's kind of, you're quantifying the problem of future. I want you to give some advice to emerging leaders here. So for leaders early in their journey, how can they build this muscle of taking bold bets while still earning trust and credibility?
You just have to start doing it. Like, here's the thing, you don't get credibility for bold bets by not taking bold bets. Raise your hand. Like, can I try that? Can I try to solve it? The next time somebody says that's an impossible deadline, say that, oh, let me try. That's you build credibility by actually doing. If you're able to do that, then you are better off than like 90% of the people because people are just talking. Nobody's taking action. If you're able to do that, once you have done that, the next part is how do you translate that into a small thing? Something small. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. Something small. Does that work? Does that not work? Is it a small experiment? Like, try that, and if it works for you, that's great. And I think that's where you can start building the muscle for constantly learning. If there is one thing that people need to do is you have to learn something new. If you haven't learned something new in a couple of years and you don't feel like you've learned something new, then you need to rethink how you are approaching your work. So try to get perspective from people who might actually be able to tell you whether you're making progress or you're not, right? I think that might be one thing which is helpful.
That's great, Abhay. And I'm sure everybody, including our viewers, they will all agree actions are powerful and you need to take actions to go places where you want to go. So, with that in mind, I want to shift gears to personal growth. Leadership obviously demands continuous growth and learning, just that we talked about. And how do you approach your own personal and professional development?
I think two things I would say. The first one is I read. I love reading the news. If there is something happening in the tech space, I'm consuming it because I'm kind of a nerd from that vantage point. I also feel like it helps me make sense out of the world in some way, shape, or form. If I could make sense out of the world, then I could apply it appropriately in my own. That is like I think my approach to this. I would get up at 4:30 every day and I read news for an hour, hour and a half if I could. So that is my standard. That's like the starting point of what I do. I would say the other thing here is leaning into like I've never felt fully qualified for anything I have done. And that's okay. So what that means is I need to constantly be learning to be fully qualified. And that is wherever I have an opportunity to do that, I will try to learn something about my space, which is there, or an adjacent space, or how can I kind of learn by doing. I want to get better at my craft. And I'm totally clear about the fact that I'm not the authority in any of these spaces, and that's okay. But I have incredible breadth of knowledge across all of these pieces that I can make sense out of them and I can logically work my way through them. And I think that's the mindset that I have to personal growth. So when I have an opportunity to take a structured course, I will take a structured course. I love listening to business biographies. Like to me, that is like one of the best ways that I learn because I'm like, these companies or leaders kind of have gone through incredible challenges and they've kind of come onto the other side. What caused them to kind of be successful? What were their failures? What were their feelings as individuals, or despite their feelings as individuals, how were they successful in their corporate lives? And I'm like, this, it's fascinating to me. So those are things which I kind of enjoy learning. The other one, which I would say, is like I'm learning from my teams constantly. I am learning from my team members more than almost anybody else. And I get elements of inspiration from each of them. And so that just makes me better, every time I'm approaching this.
Great. And if you want to talk about mentors, we all need one. We all look for that one mentor or who always put us in a different trajectory when it comes to our careers. So, who has been your most influential mentor and what have you learned from them? I think you talked about your first manager and a really powerful story there. But if you can talk about the most influential mentor that you've met and what have they done for you that unlocked your true potential?
I think so. I have wherever it made sense, I have actually had my managers be my mentors because I have the most amount of access to them. I have incredible access to my managers, right? To the person I'm reporting into, and my current manager, who I've had the opportunity to report to for the last 5+ years, has just been incredible. His name is Brian in Brian Valley, and he is just an incredible thinker. But most importantly, what I learned from him is constantly challenging but also just being incredibly supportive of everything that I want to do. He is able to kind of provide that backstop. There is a frame where I find myself to be constantly going to seek his advice. And then the reality of it is the solutions will also come from me as I can have the conversation with him. And that is brilliant. Like I just like, it's a mark of if an incredible coach, but also like somebody who's pushing you. I think where possible, I would encourage anybody to have like a strong relationship with their managers where they can be, your mentors. I have really lucked out on that front, so I'm deeply appreciative of that. The flip side of all of this is, you know, you will not always have the best managers, and I've had my share of those too, but you learn from that too. Oh, that's like in my brain Don't do that, Abhay, when you are in that same situation. Like that's actually really helpful. It's powerful. It's not that complicated. Like people, like great leaders make you feel really good. They inspire you. Make you actually want to do things in an extraordinary way. When you see that, remember it. When you see the anti-examples of it, remember those two, because we all will start behaving like it's so interesting. Like everybody eventually will grow into some incredible roles that they deserve. Do they remember everything that was really important? Because when you were the first day in a new job and how you got treated, will you remember that when you're a CHRO? Important to do that, because that is like, if you can do that really well, you're golden. Yeah, you certainly have the ability to connect in a way which is outstanding. So that would be my own reflection on that. I would say I have leaned in on my manager to be the mentor, at least over the last several years. I have a broad friend circle who kind of act formal advisors and mentors to one extent or another, but I haven't I seeked out like true mentorship outside of that.
Abhay, I think you're lucked out big time. There's no dearth of solving problems. If you're working in an organization like Google, where there's hundreds and thousands of people, there's a lot of problems you're always solving. How do you take time for yourself amidst all the constant demands of leadership and work? How do you take the time for yourself to self reflect? Are there any specific things that you do to do self reflection? And what are those incredible things that come out of self reflection?
I don't have a structured process for self-reflection, is what I would say. What I do have is the notion of, getting up a little bit early in the day and taking time before anything else happens to set my context. And my context, I love reading the news, so I will do that. Like, I love my coffee, so I will do that. But I will also get into work really early because that gives me the opportunity to reflect on my day, on what I want to focus on, how I want to approach things. And, because I have the space early in the day, I don't feel like I don't feel forever kind of lost on time. Like I'm able to kind of create time when I need time. And so I find that to be incredibly valuable. Does it mean that I have to flex to longer days? Yes, it happens often enough. But I'm doing that because it's actually helpful for me. My pace for like I'm not the type of person who would be able to kind of like I have like thinking time throughout my day. Because if I don't have that, if I find my calendar is fully blocked out, then I'm just not as productive as I can be. And some of that is just, me just needing mental space to kind of move the work forward. In terms of like deep self-reflection, I think I only have done that when I have gone through structured programs, which have kind of forced me to reflect on the course of my life, like having working with a career coach and things of that nature. But I don't do it on a regular basis as a practice. These are things which I feel like I have arrived at over the course of the last several years of like, incrementally thinking about it, sometimes in a structured way, but mostly like opportunistically.
Yeah, I think constant self reflection, even if you're not doing it in a structured manner, but doing it incrementally on a daily basis, that is also incredibly powerful to elevate your game. So we'll leave with one last question on this, Abhay. I know you are a voracious reader and you're one of those people that is always nerding out on books. What's the book that you're reading right now and how have you felt it so far?
Oh my God. So I read lots of books, but recently so the one which is this week, which has kind of caught my attention. I'm a little bit obsessed with NVIDIA and Jensen Huang. He's the CEO of NVIDIA, and his story is incredibly powerful. So there's a book that came out on him called The Thinking Machine, and it's his story, it's NVIDIA's story. I am listening to the audiobook version of that, and I love it. I love it for so many reasons. He's an example of a leader who had like incredibly difficult childhood where he came from Taiwan as an immigrant, went to boarding school, was bullied, worked his way through, kind of like did incredibly well, and then took some risks. And how he's kind of gone through the process of risk. But he also kind of comes across as a very volatile leader, like constantly screaming and like dressing down people. And it's fascinating for me to see that and hear that. And then how I internalize that, what would I learn from that? Like that's like the type of question which I ask myself. But the guy is is crazy. He is crazy and he's crazy brilliant at the same time. But my takeaway is he has an unending appetite for underwriting risk. That is what I took for it. And that is like, it just comes through in every decision he's making, like making long term bets. I think leaders who can take risks for the longest periods of time will have the highest payoffs, period. Doesn't matter what, in which space you're in. If you can kind of take the risk for a really long period of time, then you will have an incredibly high payoff. And I think he just signifies that for me. And like the stories around him are amazing. He's like, from my own work also, like there are things which I'm very intrigued by because I study organizational design and structures and all of that. And he's a leader who's got a span of control of 45 to 60 people reporting to him at any point in time. And that makes NVIDIA a very flat organization. And that is really interesting. I'm like, oh, this multi-trillion-dollar company is able to do all the things they're able to do because they have a really flat structure, which means information takes very little to travel from top to the bottom. That's a meaningful competitive advantage in regards to that versus anybody else. And that becomes interesting to be able to see, okay, is that replicable? Is that not replicable? Is that healthy? Is that not healthy? Those are questions that come in my mind as I kind of think about it. Or a different way to think about it would be, oh, with the advent of AI, can a manager actually manage 45 people really well? Can I see myself doing that in the future? Like, here's Jensen Huang, who's able to kind of get incredible productivity from his entire organization because he's breaking a rule which I thought was sacred. Like most people say, like, you should be able to manage between 3 and 7 or 10 or something like that. That's like, we all think of those things as reasonable. He's breaking that rule and he's able to leverage that to an advantage. And so that is the question which I ask myself, which are the rules which I would want to break with some intentionality? That's where my learning comes as I kind of look at some of these things. But just an example of like how I kind of consume information more so than my reading necessarily.
And I actually like the fact that how you tie back to your own personal self, right? Like you read the book, what is in it for me and how I can apply that in my everyday life and everyday work situation. But again, thank you so much for your time today. We learned everything to do with employee experience, organizational design, how AI is impacting the world of people, how you take your time to lead teams. We kind of dived into the nitty gritties of your leadership style and how to earn trust, how to build credibility, and how to take bold bets and still be incredibly successful at the end of it. So thank you so much, Abhay. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you today.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Rahul. You guys have been fantastic. Thank you for hosting me today. And I love the conversation. And I would love to come back to you guys again sometime in the future when I have something more interesting to talk about. But this was an amazing conversation for me. So I really appreciate it.